we got to talk about media. We got to talk about censorship. We got to talk about people being fired. Now, yesterday, June 6th, 2024, I think all of us were shocked and surprised to see the recent announcement that Brianna Joy Gray was fired from the Hill. And there's a lot to it. But there's a different perspective in which I want to take this, and that is the ever-increasing jackboot, or the ever-increasing shadow of authoritarian figures and their jackboots willing to censor anybody. And this goes for all people across the political spectrum, be you left or right, libertarian or green, Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative, progressive, socialist. Doesn't matter where you stand politically, what generation you're part of, the color of your skin, who you worship. There is a wave of censorship, and it's abundantly clear that corporations are dictating to the people what they are allowed to see and what they cannot see. Okay? And unfortunately, it's getting worse. And since I've, started to, really get more involved in this business, this landscape of social media and so much more, I've seen things get progressively worse. 2017, we started off. We here at Hardlands Media. And I've been seeing so many people being censored, shadow banned, silenced, fired, removed, deplatformed. It's becoming tiresome, but it's a story that's all too familiar. So let's go ahead and pull up this tweet here. Let's go and pull this up here. This happened yesterday. It finally happened. The Hill has fired me. There should be no doubt that Rising the Hill has a clear pattern of suppression of speech. And of course, sorry about that, particularly when it's critical of the state of Israel. This is why they fired Katie Halpert, and it was only a matter of time before they fired me. And obviously, if you want to help out Brianna Joy Gray, you can follow her on our Patreon page. But here's what they wrote. And honestly, I would expect a little bit more out of Next Star Media because you spelled Brianna Joy Gray's name wrong. Where's the H in her name? Anyways, Brianna Joy Gray, notice of contract termination. Dear Brianna Joy Gray, they spelled her name wrong twice. Keep it in a professional, Next Star Media. Dear Brianna Joy, or Brianna Joy Gray, this is 30 days written notice that your consulting services agreement is being terminated pursuant to the provisions of Section 5.3 for convenience. Thank you for your contributions, and we wish the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely yours, Next Star Media. Wow, guys. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and pull up this tweet on Easy Street. Let's go ahead and pull this up right here. Republican subcommittee chairman and PAC vulture pulls a Karen, tags manager to fire anchor when the facts don't care about his feelings. So this is Mike Ginsburg. It says, hey, the Hill, it's time to fire Brianna Joy Gray, or hashtag fire Brianna. So this is what happens. And by the way, he is the vice president and deputy consultant at a Virginia-based defense contractor. So who knew? Who knew? Hashtag fire Brianna. So there was a whole wave because Brianna Joy Gray actually interviewed one of the sisters' hostages. And it was an interview in which, boy, oh boy, I guess no one liked Brianna Joy Gray's response or interaction with this Israeli woman. However, I mean, we've seen our fair share of anchors on BSDNC, on Fox News, on CNN, have their own little back and forth. But there's a bigger picture here, and that is censorship, because Brianna Joy Gray was one of the few people who was being critical of Israel on the Hill. Now, we know that everyone else here in independent media, we've been extremely critical, and because of that, sometimes we have to move our content over the Rumble or any other alternative social media platform because the censorship is all too real. And it's becoming an ongoing problem, especially as the war in Gaza continues to intensify. No one can deny the fact that there are men, women, and children starving in Gaza. No one can deny the fact that the military operations taking place in Rafah are only intensifying even more so. I want to pull up this video here from Kim Iverson because she kind of breaks it down in regards to really what's happening in this realm of media and why voices are being silenced.
Big news that just happened. Brianna Joy Gray from Rising, The Hill's Rising. As many of you know, I was on Rising as one of their main hosts for a while. Brianna Joy Gray has been hosting the show with Robbie Suave for the last while. She has been fired from The Hill. She has announced it publicly. I've been in contact with her, as well as with Robbie, as well as with others at the Hill. And it has been confirmed that she has been fired. She tweeted this out. She says, "It finally happened. The Hill has fired me. There should be no doubt that Rising has a clear pattern of suppressing speech, particularly when it's critical of the state of Israel. This is why they fired Katie Halper, and it was only a matter of time before they fired me. You can continue to follow me at Patreon, Bad Faith Podcast. She does have her own podcast that she's been doing and has continued to do for quite a while, so you can follow her there." And then she attached the letter that she received, the email that she received.
Again, look, maybe this is me being just a little bit petty here, but seriously, next star, spell check, and what? Only just one or two sentences after years of being on your network. Now, look, Brianna Joy Gray, I think, is going to be A-okay. She's got a successful podcast. She's got a large social media following. She's going to be okay. But what's not okay is the silencing of voices. And we've seen this before. Here, best example, a Coca-Cola classic example would be, remember the war in Iraq? Remember the 2003 invasion? Well, before the invasion was leading up, and there were talks of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, there were just a few people who were critical of this invasion, whether or not we should do it or not, whether or not we should topple Saddam Hussein's government. And were their voices heard? No. A lot of anti-war critics were silenced and suppressed. Many of them lost their jobs. Many people got censored. I know Jimmy Dore has brought it up numerous times of how the anti-war movement was silenced and basically taken over by the Democratic Party. Never forget that there were a lot of Democrats who were gung-ho for that invasion in Iraq. And if you were ever to challenge them or be critical of it, well, then you were a bad person, or you were secretly a traitor or something of that nature. Yes, folks, the reality is this. Our media, our entire political landscape is controlled by corporations. And we could thank Bill Clinton, who signed the Telecoms Act to make the media landscape what it is now. Do not upset the corporate masters. Do not upset the lobby groups. Do not upset the political establishment. Because if you do, look up. There goes that jackboot coming right down on you.
June 6th, Brianna Joy Gray, they spelled her name wrong. Notice of contract termination. Dear Brianna Joy, this is 30 days written notice that your consulting services agreement is being terminated pursuant to the provisions of Section 5.3 for convenience. Thank you for your contributions, and we wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely yours, Next Star Media. Yeah, okay. The reason why now they're not confirming, Brianna just received this email, that was it. Robbie he says he's very upset. This was not something that Robbie wanted. I know a lot of people have been watching that show and had been seeing that those two have argued a lot. They have sometimes a very contentious relationship. But Robbie had nothing to do with this. Brianna Joy Gray has tweeted since then that Robbie had nothing to do with this. Some people were kind of blaming him.
Yeah, and by the way here, folks, look, I got my criticism of Robbie too, but look, I do respect the work that he does. Same thing for Brianna Joy Gray or anyone else, okay? Look, doing this kind of business is pretty tough. It is an arduous task. Doing, covering, especially in talking about and giving analysis on controversial subjects. I know everyone in independent media has their own fair share of, dealing with all the madness and insanity that's in this media landscape. But look, you can have a disagreement with a person and still work with them, okay? I've had my fair share of people who I've disagreed with. And look, people don't start blaming Robbie. Because if he didn't do it, then he didn't do it, okay? And I'm going to take his word for it because that's what Brianna Joy Gray has said. That's what Kim Iverson's saying. So there you go. And if anyone, no matter where you stand politically, the Brianna Joy Gray being let go like this should be a red flag because we've seen this before. We've seen this happen to libertarian and conservative commentators and those who are progressives and in the left. Censorship is never the answer. And remember, it's what the corporations want. You don't want to upset the powers that be.
He is truly upset about this. This is, look, Brianna Joy Gray recently has been taking a lot of crap for her stance on Israel. She is very much against what Israel's doing. She's anti-Zionist. She's anti the ethno-state of Israel. She's said everything that I have said here on this show, as many others have said on their own shows. but Brianna was working for a sort of like a mainstream news outlet. They kind of paint themselves as they sort of pride themselves on kind of straddling the middle on that a little bit. They're a mainstream news organization, but they try to, with Rising, for example, and trying to have more anti-establishment voices on, they've tried to be less establishmenty and more about, kind of being the voice of the people or allowing populist movements a voice and whatnot. So they've kind of straddled the line a little bit, but then they have their lines that you're not allowed to cross. And one of them being Israel. You're allowed to criticize Israel to a degree, but they do have a line. Katie Halper was a guest co-host. She was kind of, they had her filling in here and there. She wrote up a radar, which is our what we were asked to write every day. That would kind of be our thoughts on something for a few minutes. And Katie wrote up a radar.
I want to acknowledge something in the chat. So Volunteera, I won't be able to read it fully, but in your comment, did she get fired because she rolled her eyes at that guest? That was one of the many reasons. That's one of the many reasons why she was hit with this letter. Again, a letter where they spelled her name wrong, not once, but twice. And they just gave 2 sentences. Jesus. I've never seen anything that kind of, or that level of unprofessionalism, but okay, from a media network. But yeah, that's one of many reasons. It was continuous and ongoing. And of course, remember, to anyone that's watching the show, when you challenge the powers that be and you're not following the neoliberal narrative, it's only a matter of time before you get put on that chopping block. Now, look, I know for a fact Brianna Joy Gray is going to be just fine. She's got a very successful channel in her own right, and she's done her fair share of work. She'll land on her feet. It's just I'm more concerned about the overall landscape and how this will also seep into our territory of online independent media commentary, journalism, analysis, and so much more, because we know, and I know all too well, about the censorship. And I know a lot of my colleagues in independent media have been hit hard. Shout out to Pasta, for example. Convo Couch is still dealing with the many gut checks that impacted their channel. Indie News Network, a fantastic team of fantastic commentators who have been hit hard with censorship by YouTube and by other social media platforms. And again, I could be here all day talking about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google, and all the censorship that we have seen. Look at what they're trying to do to TikTok. It's because of all those controversial images coming out of Gaza. If you're not concerned, and I don't care where you stand politically or how you identify yourself or what generation you're part of, I don't care. What should matter to all of you is that there is a massive wave of censorship coming our way. We're in it now. And if we don't start speaking up, we're going to lose our First Amendment right, which is a very fundamental need in our society.
About Israel and about Palestine. Katie's Jewish. She wanted to basically speak up against Israel, and they wouldn't allow her to do her radar that day. They wouldn't air it. And then they didn't invite her back to be a guest co-host. That was surprising to many of us, myself, Ryan Grimm, even Brianna Joy Gray, because all of us had been, up to that point, had said things that were critical of Israel. So it was a little surprising that they, for whatever.
Also, I see in the chat, people are kind of being a little bit critical of Rob. He has voiced his opinion and said that he's against it. All right. And he spoke with Kim Iverson, and even Brianna Joy Gray spoke for him too. I'm also saying that he's possibly on vacation. Fine. But let's everyone leave Robbie alone. Okay. Because look, we've seen other commentators across the political spectrum being censored. The bigger story about all of this that we're seeing here is the censorship that is impacting us all. Okay. I have seen this. I have lived through this so many times. And actually, to tell you the truth, the most times we've been hit with censorship, myself and Daniel, was in the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration after the 2020 presidential election cycle. We've dealt with our fair share. But the amount of risk that happened to this channel, to where we nearly got it terminated and destroyed, happened after the 2020 presidential election cycle. Which is why I'm more than happy to help out my colleagues in independent media should they ever be hit with censorship, because it's something that I'm all too familiar with, and I don't want anyone to go through it.
Whatever reason, crack down on Katie. Still unclear on that. Maybe it's because she was a guest co-host and wasn't one of the more permanent rotation. I don't know why they decided that she wasn't allowed to say anything about Israel when the rest of us had done some pieces that were a bit critical of Israel. Brianna Joy Gray recently, it has been really refreshing to see that even after the whole Katie Halper incident, where she wasn't, where they basically let her go, it was nice to see that Brianna was allowed to actually speak up about Israel. She was allowed to freely be very critical. She got into really heated debates with Robbie, and she had just been really speaking her mind and doing really great work. Well, she apparently, they had enough. They could only take so much, and then they had enough. Where she recently got into, and where I think this is my own speculation as to why this led to her firing, and this is something that should, everybody in America should be appalled by this. We are supposed to be a free speech nation. It doesn't matter what side you're on when it comes to the Israel-Palestinian debate. We should have journalists in this country that are allowed to report and speak their minds. People should be allowed to do this. We should not be living in a world of censorship because the Zionist hold of our political system, our media, whatever it is, it's really, really antithetical to American values. But where Brianna Joy Gray got into trouble, in my opinion, is that she recently debated another Briahna, Brianna Wu, and in the debate, was very much saying things that many of us agree with. She was talking about the ethno-nation and how Israel doesn't have a right to remain an ethno-nation. It doesn't have an ethno-nation does not have the right to exist. We proved that with Nazi Germany. We said you do not have the right to have an ethno-Aryan nation. And in the process of creating your Aryan nation, exterminating millions of people in order to get to that point, that is not a right that you intrinsically have. And we should hold that same value on to the state of Israel and say, you also do not have that right. Brianna Joy Gray mentioned, she debated that. She also talked about, she was following along. There's the story of the mass rapes. Brianna had been following that story. The gray zone is done, which we're going to get to the gray zone here in a second because they're also under fire. But the gray zone had been Max Blumenthal.
So here, I want to pull up that video, like one of the videos in question that actually caused or was one, again, of many that were impacting, that led to this pushback and why there was a social media wave of censoring Brianna Joy Gray. So let's go ahead and play this video right here.
Thank you. Me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining.
And this has to deal with, of course, the debunking of many of the stories that took place. I got to be careful with the words because of the YouTube censorship and guidelines, but there is that. However, there was something else that happened, and I want to give a huge shout out to Hotspot for actually capturing this clip right here. Same guest in question. Let's go and pull up this video here where, well, we will see a 9/11 for the second time in the USA, which is very disturbing.
This is not okay that we have terror organizations that's controlling the free world and people in the West letting it happen and stay on the streets, killing the hostages now. Or
no one is saying that. No, the protests that I've seen, no one is saying that. Hell, you got people in Israel saying, hey, Netanyahu, we should get our hostages back. A lot of people are saying, no one's saying that. No one is saying that at all.
Israelis must die. What did I do wrong? What did my sister did wrong? Nothing. Nothing. We did nothing wrong.
Well,
this was happening inside our own country. Yeah. And if the world won't help us, we will see 9/11 the second time in the US as well. But we can already see in the United States, in Michigan, rallies that's calling death to America.
No, you got people who are calling for uncommitted voters who are saying that they are not committed to Joe Biden. You have people who are very afraid for their relative safety. I mean, for example, a lot of those people in Michigan, and we've covered that story, have relatives in Gaza. Let's be clear here. Gaza, 90% of it's a moonscape. You got men, women, children starving in Rafah. It is madness and insanity all around. You got aid workers being attacked. You have people of the free press being attacked. And I really don't see how an enclave controls the world when AIPAC and other pro-Israeli lobby groups are buying off our politicians, owning our politicians, and have influence in other parliaments and senates across the world. Heaven forbid.
Not condemning terror organizations in Israel or any other place, in fact, is reflecting to your country as well.
I'm just going to push back against the implication that in Michigan, which has the largest Muslim and Arab population in America, that there is any threat of terrorism from our own people. And I would like to clarify also that one of the rationale that was presented for 9/11 was discussed with America's support of Israel's continued occupation of Palestine. So that's neither here nor there. I really do hope that Netanyahu agrees and Israel agrees to the ceasefire deal that could bring all the hostages, including your sister, home. And I'm sure many people watching are praying for her safety.
So I want to turn right back to this video from Kim Iverson because, again, people are asking, hey, what was the cause? Well, this interview was one of many, but it can be argued that it was the nail in the coffin. However, Brianna Joy Gray has every right to cover and talk about the crisis in Gaza, as does her colleague Robbie or anybody else in independent media or across media landscape as a whole. All of you, just regular people, have a right to have your opinion as well. But the problem is that the censorship that we are seeing that is being led and approved by both Democratic and Republican politicians and corporate media also giving them cover should be an alarm for all of us. So always remember that in times of crisis like this, the establishment is always quick to stamp down any dissenting opinion. None of us should be happy about this situation, and all of us should be concerned about how worse it will get if nothing fundamentally changes.
Talking about the reality of what really happened, where there was some evidence, where there wasn't evidence. There was a lot of stories circulating around. New York Times circulated a story about mass rapes without having a single shred of evidence to back it up, which is not journalism. And they were pointing it out. The Gray Zone was pointing it out, and they were able to and then, of course, the New York Times backtracks later on, and there's this, well, okay, we didn't really actually have any evidence, but by then the damage is done, even if they come back with the retraction a month later or 2 months later. Well, Briahna had been talking about that as well, saying that there is no evidence of this. We can only talk about things where there's evidence. She was holding firm to that. And I think where there was a lot of attacks on her after her debating, after her being more public about her debate, it did seem like there was a concerted effort against her to silence her. They came after her. The mob came after her. And there was mainstream reporters, news outlets going after Briahna, calling her, anti-Semite, despicable. They were putting all these labels on her. One thing in particular, though, that I think probably was the line that was crossed for the Hill and for, I'm sure, their Zionist supporters or whatever. She was interviewing a sister of one of the hostages. And during that interview, it was her, when the sister brought up rape and, claims of rape, Briahna scoffed at that and was like, there's no evidence of this. Clearly, she's sick of hearing it. As many of us are sick of hearing the propaganda when there's no actual evidence to back it up. So
I'm going to stop right here because, again, I'm going to post Kim Iverson's original video in the description box below and link in the comments section so all of you can see it as well. But let's talk about propaganda. Let's talk about how this war in Gaza has been getting out of control. First of all, number one, through this propaganda, many people in corporate media were doing their job as always, especially when we see a conflict happen between Israel and Palestine. And that is, Israel has no choice. Israel has no choice but to defend itself. And to be clear here, again, what happened on October 7th, horrifying, disgusting. But the aftermath, unchecked aggression, destruction of all of the universities and schools and hospitals, residential areas, community centers, refugee camps, and so much more. Now all of Gaza is a moonscape. 36,000 confirmed dead men, women, and children, but I'm willing to bet that number's a lot higher. You got men, women, and children starving to death. And all of this, again, this massive madness of people being exterminated and being destroyed because of propaganda. Stories that have been debunked. Stories that have been now finally revealed as, oh, well, this didn't happen. Well, this didn't happen. This stuff didn't happen here. But what is abundantly clear is that we are witnessing man's inhumanity to man once again. And our politicians are unable to lift a finger. No one can deny the imagery that we've seen on social media. No matter where you stand, I mean, the videos are up there. We're seeing this crisis get worse. And all what this war has done is lay the foundations for the next war to happen. The next insanity. And as it stands right now, there's now even talks of the conflict now going into Lebanon. When does the war stop? When does the killing stop? And will the media do its job to really call out Israel for its actions? We already seen how this person, Netanyahu, has given a middle finger to Biden and his entire administration. We've seen how he's given a middle finger to the European Union, to any nation that's been critical of him. He's given the middle finger to the ICC and the ICJ. So nothing is changing. And I dread the words of Bassem Youssef when he was having his interview saying, you know, Israel's going to get away with it. And it's abundantly clear. And so long as you have, again, a weak political system like ours in which our politicians can be bought, because remember, our media is shocked. They are shocked that our politicians can be bought by lobby groups and other pro-Israeli lobby groups. Oh my goodness. How can that happen? This is how it happens. And when you have a corrupt system like this with corrupt politicians, you're going to have a corrupt media. Don't upset the neoliberal narrative. Don't shake the apple cart. A final note for this. I think Brianna Joy Gray is going to be fine. You know, obviously, I think she's got to hit that reset button. And no matter what, there's always a chance to do more. But the real threat is what lies beyond, what comes after this. And that is censorship. The jackboot of censorship. How people's voices can be silenced and suppressed. And if you're not concerned about the overall crisis that's happening in this country, especially when it comes down to a free press, brace yourself, because we're all on that chopping block. We're seeing what happens to whistleblowers and journalists and commentators who stand up and speak truth to power. Keep your heads on a swivel, folks. This is only the beginning. And mind you, all this wave of censorship is happening under a Democratic administration. Geez, I remember when Vote Blue, no matter who, was saying all of this would be worse under Trump. How so? How so now? It's always been this way.